Time I try too hard, babe. I try to make your heart break. Run away, run away. Run away, run away from me. I'm not just anybody. I won't trust anybody. Need to confess for all my sins. If your body is a temple, then I'll tear it down again. Yeah, it's the lovers out. Time don't matter now. We'll do whatever now, except worry about tomorrow. Worry about tomorrow. Make mistakes, but we learn. But when we crash, you gon' burn. Ain't no balance in this life. What you thinking? Pray for forgiveness for another day I missed you. Baby, baby, I'm the worst that committed.
Welcome to the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival live stream. My name is Eric Hong, and I'm a programmer and grant writer for PAF. I am also the executive director of the Music of Asian America Research Center, which is one of PAF's many community partners. I will be moderating this evening's filmmaker Q&A with the creators of the feature documentary, The Six. We'll be taking audience questions, so please make sure to type your audience questions into the comment section, and we will get to them as soon as possible. So let's start by going around the virtual room and have our guests introduce themselves and their film. Why don't we start with Arthur?
Hey, Eric. Good to see you. Hi to everyone else attending. So my name's Arthur Jones. I am the director of The Six and in general, a documentary director based for a long time in China, mainly where I am now, which is in Shanghai.
Great. Luo Tong?
Hi, I'm Luo Tong. I'm the producer of the documentary The Six. I was born in Shanghai, I grew up in Shanghai, and I'm still based in Shanghai, China. That's also where The Six was conceived there.
Great. And Stephen? Oh, is Stephen frozen? Okay, we'll come back to Stephen when he's back.
In his absence, I would just introduce Stephen as the
Sure.
Stephen and I co-created the project originally in a number of years ago, 6 years ago. Stephen is an old friend of mine and of Luo Tong's. We've known each other for about 20 years and is an author, an explorer, a scuba diver, and is based in Beijing.
Great.
And has written books on maritime history before. This is our second film together.
Wonderful. So, Stephen, do you want to say hi? Oh, I think we might have lost him again. Okay. So, let me ask, I guess I will start with Arthur. And what led you to become so interested in these six survivors that you decided to spend several years uncovering their stories?
They were, well, Stephen brought this idea to me. It was at the tail end of the last project that we did. And we're still hearing the tail end of Stephen there, I think.
Yes.
Stephen brought the idea to me. We were just finishing off the last project that the three of us had done together, which was another a maritime related history story, a bit of a detective story as well. And we sort of devised a way of making a history investigation, if you like. You know, I'm not interested in raw history. I'm not a historian. I'm a documentary person. So I'm looking for ways to tell a story and make it feel urgent and present and all the rest of it. So towards the tail end of that project, Stephen said to me, "Oh, there were Chinese people on Titanic. We should do a film about that at some point." And what I didn't realize at the time was that this, because I don't know much about Titanic. I mean, it's culturally there in the background for a lot of us, but I didn't I'm not a maritime history buff or anything. I mean, what I know through the films that I've made about that theme. But I was persuaded over time because it was such an easy pitch, and people here in China responded so quickly to it. There was this sense of like, how did we not know about these people? How is their story not being told? And the more I looked at it, the more I realized that was true. There were 700 plus survivors of Titanic, and that if you go online, you can find lots about pretty much all of them. They're all well known. Their lives have been investigated. Multiple descendants or non-descendants claim to be descendants. You know, people like to be connected to the story, and the Chinese guys were just the unique exception to that. They had no descendants who'd ever claimed them. The information was so sparse on them. There were just doing these passenger lists, survivor lists, and so it seemed like a great basis for a film, an investigative film, because it was like an interesting bit of history. And the other thing, to be completely sort of mercenary about it, was that I just found it the easiest film I've ever made to pitch. You know what I mean? You'd have a minute and you could say to someone, you know, did you know there were Chinese people in Titanic? And everyone responded. It was such an easy pitch that it felt like this is sort of low-hanging fruit. I don't know how this wasn't made already. And so that was the basis for making it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Luo Tong, when did you find out about this, and what was your reaction when you first heard about the idea?
Well, when they first told me about the story, I didn't realize that Titanic had anything to do with Chinese people. So I think that was the reaction among a lot of people that we talked to initially. But Stephen and Arthur, we've worked on a different documentary, longer form documentary before. So it was a kind of a habit of starting with something new, starting with something like initially we thought it was going to be a very independent three-man documentary style with Arthur holding a little tiny camera following Stephen around, exploring new territories, new area. It was at the beginning, it was like that, but soon after the two had found some information, and that required a lot of expertise in like genealogy and that special period of a certain part of the history in the world, and that required a lot more help from experts, from researchers, and from people who know that part of the story. So we then expanded the team from initially 2 to 20 plus researchers, and then because we had to cover all the stories in like all over the world, really. So we also need to hire volunteers locally to help us go into libraries, certain facilities to find, dig into very, very hidden, secret part of the old ancient history. So it became much more evolved after 2 years of research. And then it formed into the shape that you see now.
Great, thank you. So how, and this is for any of you, how long were you into the research and process that you found enough materials for a feature-length documentary?
Stephen, you want to go for that? I think there must be a lag there.
Moving very slowly.
Yeah, there's a lot of lag on.
I see his mouth moving, but
yeah.
Stephen, can we maybe try no camera and see if we can hear you that way? This.
Camera's off. Let's see if we can hear
Okay.
Stephen.
Yeah, does that work?
He said, "I'm out. Good night."
Okay. I think he's struggling to be in this conversation.
Yes.
You know, Luo Tong and I are 6,000-7,000 miles away in China, but Stephen's connection from Florida is not holding up. So,
Okay.
well, I'll answer that then. So in total, I think the research was about 4.5, 5 years, and the first couple of years, Stephen and I were dipping in and out of the project. We had other things going on, and we didn't have backing at that point. So as Luo Tong says, it took a while for it to build up momentum. People loved the story, but it was hard for us to work on it with such a small team. There was so much legwork to do, so many places to get to. Stephen was putting a lot of time on it, in his own time. I was doing what I could from Shanghai, but at 2 years in, it became clear we were going to get a theatrical distributor, and thank goodness, and thanks to Luo Tong finding that, and people began to know that it was going on in China, and so that really helped us. We expanded the team. It began with Stephen. I'd occasionally chip in on research as well as filming. And gradually the team got bigger and bigger. I think by the end we had about 20 people, something like that, working on it, across 3 continents, 4 or 5 countries, and so about 4 years. And there was no pre-production. There was a day when we started, and on that day I picked up my camera too. So we sort of began, and it built very organically. It's a process that is incredibly inefficient, but it's if you have the time or you can accept the fact that there's no obvious sort of end to it. It's a way of making a film that I really enjoy, because it's not got the formatting of TV or something like that. There's no pressure because there's no money. So that's how it sort of developed, and it's how we made the last film, the Poseidon Project, and it seemed like a great way to make this kind of film. So that's how it developed. And then the post-production was over a year. It was incredibly difficult to cut as a film because it just had so many different narrative lines to it. There was so much going on. It was a very complex story. And even as we entered post-production, it took us several months to shape the narrative and work out where we were going to put most of our focus. We had so many hours of footage and this complex mix of kind of actuality stuff, a sort of verite style where it's run and gun, following people around, combined with a lot of old footage, old photographs. We added animation of a certain style that again took a long time to develop, and then of course we were joined by James Cameron at some point, and we were able to use Titanic footage from his film. So integrating all of those looks and all the rest of it took a long time. So it was well over a year of post-production.
Great, yeah. Well, it looks great. Are there any stories that were cut that you were really interested in, and really don't want to let go, but had to, that you want to tell right now?
Well, you see in the film, there's a storyline that came into the film very late, which was the storyline of the man who contacted us and claimed to be connected to some of the families, or that he had a connection. His grandmother had told him some stories he knew. We put that into the film very late in the day. Initially, we were confused about how to integrate it, how that would work as a storyline. But that was not the only one. There was another very significant family that contacted us that we believe is probably a direct line descendant of one of the other survivors. And they were members of the family wanted to be in, other members were less certain. It seems odd when I've told people this before, and they sometimes go, why would they not want to do it? But in a way, for me, it sort of made sense of the idea that you could have 100+ years of silence on this story, that people have mixed feelings about it. In that Chinese diaspora community, there's complicated feelings about the past. And there's also built into this story these fragilities, the complex truths and untruths that older generations had to tell to conceal their identity, then you add into the mix the terrible, it now turns out, lies that were told about the Chinese passengers on Titanic, and the kind of discrimination that generation experience, day to day, make it, I think, a very complicated emotional piece of family history for anyone involved. So
Sure.
so I think that's why. So that was, for me, the thing that stands out, and the thing that I'd love to be able to spend more time on. And we keep that as a sort of open-ended thing. At some point, we may have a chance to speak to those families again and get them to tell their side of the story.
Great.
I want to chip in. There's
Yeah.
also a great amount of stories about the researchers themselves. Because from the very beginning, we already decided that this is not just going to be a like host narrated TV style documentary. It's going to be following the researchers, their discoveries, their emotions, and that kind of a storytelling style. So there were a lot of moments when our cameras captured a lot of moments of researchers fighting, debating, and then they were frustrated when they found some clue, and it took them 3 months to follow one clue, and in the end they hit the dead end, and they were, some really affected them, and those stories were really interesting. Like, you would see somebody who were upset for like a few days just because they were so disappointed in themselves by not getting succeeded at finding the real thing. And those were, we really wanted to, well, I really wanted to tell that side of the stories too. But in the end, we do have a film that's only going to be 100 minutes, and we have hundreds of hours of footage that's just not gonna fit in everything.
Yeah, let me follow up on that a little bit, because that was one of the more interesting. You showed the messiness of the research process, and that was really interesting. And I really like that when you talked about specific types of resources, and you talked about the opportunities of these resources, but also the limitations of these resources. For the two of you, was there a particular moment in the research process that was particularly rewarding or memorable?
There's
Arthur,
a few. I mean,
there's
the
loads,
funny thing,
yeah.
the funny thing is, we worked with a historian in Canada, in Toronto, called Lily Cho, who's well known up there for her work. She's actually a literature specialist, but she's done a lot of work as well on the waves of Chinese immigration into Canada. And she reminded me of this last week. We were chatting, and she said that one day she got a phone call, and it was me, and I said to her, "Can we talk about the CI9s?" And CI9s are this particular document that were sort of proto passport for Chinese Canadians. I guess you can say Chinese Canadians, or they weren't thought of as in that way at the time, to allow them to leave and then come back in. And she said I was the first person that had ever called up and said the word CI9 to her, even though that's something she's been working on for years. So there were lots of abbreviations. We had CI9s in Canada. We had CR10s in the UK, which are sailors' documents that Chinese were used to identify Chinese men. I mean, it's such a curious time. You've got to remember, this is largely a pre-passport era. And so people's identity was really tied up with their work. And in the case of Chinese sailors, they only ever were allowed to stay because of the particular job they had. And that would allow them very limited sort of residence rights. And at any point, as we know from the Chinese Exclusion Act, those rights could be taken away. In fact, they could be taken away through the very through the very documents that allowed them to come in. So it would be like, you are a worker, you can come in to work on a railroad. 10 years later, you are a worker, and therefore by definition you can't stay. So there was sort of this terrible double-edged sword to it. And at the beginning, we viewed things like the name changes, the incredible name changes that these men and their generation went through. At some point, we were told actually by several historians that an average Chinese man who went to work overseas would, during his lifetime, have around 8 names. That would just be an average number of names that they would have used throughout their lifetime. So at the beginning, we viewed this as a terrible impediment, and it really was. I mean, in terms of research, it's very, very difficult for people who are so completely deracinated. They set off from China and they have 3 character names. Almost everyone then had 3 character names. They would get on a ship, and within a month, they only had 2 characters left, and they would be writing them in a sort of bastardized version of English. It was, and so, I mean, who is that person that's now 2 characters and it's badly spelled? There's no pinyin system. There's no, there's no formalized system for writing down Chinese characters in Cantonese or Taishanese or Mandarin or any of the multiple languages of China. So they really lose that identity. But later on, I came to see an interesting thing that was that when you've got so little power, that those very basic elements of your identity, you wield them in order to use the power that you have. So if you only have a name and an age and a job, and that's all that you're identified by, and your ethnicity gives you no rights, in fact, it takes away your rights, then you wield those 3 bits of information about yourself in order to live a better life, to access more rights. So you would change your name because you'd had an argument with a ship's captain and he put a black mark against your name, and because of his intemperance on that day or his impatience on that day, you might lose work opportunities for years. So you'd change your name just to become someone else. You'd change your age because there might be a pay increase for seniority. So if you were 30, you may get an extra $1 a month for your work. So, hey, I mean, you were 25 yesterday, why not just become 30 tomorrow? And so, and you had no right to go into America as a worker, but you did as a merchant. So you'd meet a friend somewhere and he'd have a connection to bring in some goods to America. So you'd form a partnership with him, sign a contract, and the next day you were a merchant and you'd try and get in as a merchant. So I just think that's fascinating, the idea of having so little power, but you sort of flip it and you turn those very basic things into things that you can now use to your advantage. It just makes total sense when you think about it. But I think it's completely fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Luo Tong, do you have a story you want to share about the research process?
I think the research has brought us a lot of evidence, documents, facts, but underneath that, we really, the whole process of finding those true stuff was a lot of it was the emotion throughout the whole process, because when you realize that all of these things happened for a reason, and that reason behind it was probably most of the reasons were racism, discrimination, and that was just specifically targeted at a specific group of people, and that you would be so angry. you just couldn't understand why would such thing happen like that. And that really was the drive behind all the researchers, and they want to find more of the facts and documents to prove and to tell the truth of what really happened. I think one of the moments I was really I was really feeling very emotional was when we brought Tom Thong back to the UK to meet with the grandson of Captain Luo, who rescued his father. And they were just sitting in their living room chatting like 2 old friends. Everything looked very normal. And John was already very sick then. Now he passed away. It's so sad. But he was just, he's been a famous figure for probably like his whole life, and everyone in the area knew that he was Luo's grandson, and he's a kind of famous figure. And then he meets this nobody from from a little town in the US and coming all the way to meet him, to thank him for something that his grandfather did. And then just the whole process. They were looking into the sea and then, you know, casually chatting about life. And that is the kind of moment that really, like, you know, brings you a lot of things for you to think about the world. So yeah, that was the special moment for me.
Great, wonderful. So connected with that, we have a PAF staff member who really wants to know whose idea was it for Stephen to go into the pool. I know
That's his
he's not
own
here to
idea.
defend himself, but
yeah, without wanting to misrepresent Stephen, I mean, so when we work on a film like this, as I said earlier, the ideal and the way that it feels best to make, and I think the results are best when it's organic. So pretty much we're letting it progress as it does. But at the same time, there are sometimes, you know, I keep a little list of like dream scenes that we might want to do that would be a great thing to put in there, because in the end, film is an emotional medium. It's a medium of empathy, not necessarily a medium of the transmission of information or data or something. So we're looking for moments that would carry a lot of meaning or carry some emotion, and that was one of our kind of scene that we talked about early on. And fortunately, Stephen is up for pretty much, you know, physically sort of up for anything on these projects. So we felt that was a great way to really, you know, literally immerse Stephen in the experience of those survivors. We couldn't think of another way to sort of do that, and we felt like it was something that might be, you know, visually interesting. You never know, because I mean, he may not have reacted or whatever, you know, but
right.
it turned out to be an extraordinary day we spent there at Portsmouth University, and it was an amazing experience. And Stephen's reaction, and you know, Stephen is very used to water. I mean, he's a scuba instructor. He's very experienced and has been in cold water. But you can see, even for someone whose body is used to, you know, used to cold water, he still has this very intense reaction to just being in that water for that long. And I felt like we're always trying to find a way to bring that historical experience, you know, and make it manifest on screen as something that's sort of happening in front of you, not just something that somebody's talking about. And there felt like it was no better way of doing that than people saying, you know, people seeing Stephen himself going through it and experiencing. I thought it also gave validity to some of the conclusions that Stephen was able to reach later on, and he would have this sort of built-in empathy for the guys. Yeah.
There's a little story behind it that we haven't told anyone. When Stephen was doing that, Tom was actually standing right next to us, watching him. So for Tom, the experience is like as if he was watching his father going into water and experience that. It really helped him just, you know, imagine that's how his father would have been in the water. And he was very emotional in the lab. He was almost in tears, and because you can see that Stephen, although he's a professional diver, but he was still quite suffering. He was shaky, and it was literally like if we put him longer, any longer than what he had done, it would really have affected him deeply. So that was also a special moment for Tom as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So, and maybe the last question, you've shown this film in China, right, and in the US. What do viewers in China that you've talked to take away from watching the film, and is that different from audiences in the US? I don't know if you've showed it in the UK at this point, or
well, just to say, we have actually our UK theatrical premiere is 2 days from now, so we have a run in the UK and in cinemas as well. So that's quite exciting for us. It's all selling out, so it's great news.
Wonderful.
There. And we've had some chance to see it in you know, play in other countries. So there are broadcasters who picked it up in some different countries. And hopefully that'll happen soon in the US. The talks are on the way already. As for audiences, I think once you have people in a sort of dark, I mean, I know a lot of screenings are online now, but you know, whether it's at home on their own or in a cinema surrounded by people, but in the dark, I think cinema is a great leveler. I don't see the huge difference between individuals in an audience that you might anticipate. I mean, there is a difference in platforms. You know, there's a difference between watching it in a cinema and on a small screen, or a broadcaster might have certain requirements for something. But fundamentally, you know, we make a lot of material for Chinese audiences, but overseas as well. I never see a massive difference. Obviously, there are some details that have a different cultural resonance for people with certain backgrounds, but on the whole, yeah, I was worried that it would have like a great reception in China and then not elsewhere. But we're getting large audiences, crying people, you know, people standing up at the end and being very enthusiastic. It seems fairly universal to me, and I'm glad. I'll share one thing with you. Somebody from in the early days, I thought, well, we'll make this film for China. It'll be a good Chinese story, maybe for a Chinese broadcaster. Before I knew we were going to go theatrical, and someone from PBS said to me, "Oh no, this is an American story too. You know, this is the story of how people become American. It's the story of new immigrants. We'll tell it here." And then they said, plus, you know, we love stories that paint America in a bad light. And the same, you know, with the same reaction in the UK. I mean, the sort of unpacking of history and the complexities of history, I think, is something that audiences find, and not everyone. There's some people who are uncomfortable with that, but people are interested in that. They want to explore those themes and see where they come from, whatever their sort of ethnic background. So it's been fairly universal a reaction.
Wonderful. Luo Tong, do you have anything to add?
Oh, Arthur said everything I wanted to say.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much. So we're coming to the end of our time here today. Thank you to our audience for joining us tonight. And I also certainly want to thank our filmmakers, Arthur Jones and Luo Tong, for joining us. And I'm sorry, Stephen, that your internet isn't working out tonight, for taking, you know, time off your very busy schedules to discuss your film tonight. So can you tell us where we can find more of your work, you know, online or in cinemas?
There isn't one single place, but if you search for ours online, there's Wikipedia pages for most of our films. I think you can find the information there. A good place to start would be the last film we did, the Poseidon Project, and that's available online. You can watch it online. And before that, we did a film about Chinese traditional music and a set of retired musicians who came back together to perform as an ensemble outside of the state system, which was our first big feature film in China, feature doc called A Farewell Song. You can also find that online.
Wonderful.
The Chinese Buena Vista Social Club. That's some people say.
Yeah, great. And how can we support your upcoming projects?
I think the best thing for us right now is for us to bring the Six to as many people as we can. I think you'll understand, Eric. You know, the more you get people to watch the current film, the easier it is then to take, you know, to bring the next film to an audience. So if you've seen this film and enjoyed it, you know, give us a review on IMDb, rate us, write a review there or on any of the other places that you can find, and that's hugely helpful. I think all filmmakers will know that those things are incredibly helpful. We've been very lucky on this film. You know, we had a great story in the New York Times about it. We've already had a fantastic review in the Hollywood Reporter. All of those little elements, you know, they build up together and they make the next film you know, exciting. We do have some sort of mystery films on the way, but we wouldn't want to spoil what they are. You know, we love to have a little mystery about, you know, and it takes us a while to do. We don't want to spoil the surprise about what it is, because often these historical sort of investigation pieces are best left as a mystery until late in the day. So we hope to bring something, but I can say this much: it won't be maritime history, because I'm really done now at 2. So
Great. So, well, we hope that you will submit to PAF, you know, when you're done in a couple of years. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for
Thank
attending
you.
our virtual Q&A today. The Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival is hybrid this year, with more than 100 films available through streaming online and 6 in-person events held at Asian Arts Initiative, including the closing film tomorrow evening. You can find more about this year's festival and tickets at paf.org. I'm Eric Hong, so good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm feeling young, uninterrupted. I'll pave my way. I'm in touch with nature, interpret every little thing that I say. I'm feeling cold and unashamed. Pop tunes got me feeling lonely. Need an escape. So tell me, is this love? I think I'm getting hungry. I'm feeling down from the last day. There's every plate you set it right. I'm getting lit off the process. Anything you say, I chew. Spit my spoiled food. I chew. Spit my spoiled food. Hiding like it's left, right, up, down, in the top.